Library. Welcome to Paul Bunyan. That is our story today. This is a tall tale that has been retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. And a tall tale is a story that's very exaggerated. There's some elements of truth in it, but certainly you'll see a lot of the events that happen in this story really couldn't have happened. But it makes for a great story and it's lots of fun. And then you'll stay tuned for the craft afterwards, where you will be making Babe the Blue Ox, who was Paul's faithful companion. Paul Bunyan, a tall tale retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. For my heroic nephew, Stephen Hoffman. Paul Bunyan was the largest, smartest, and strongest baby ever born in the state of Maine. Even before he learned to talk, Paul showed an interest in the family logging business. He took the lumber wagon and wandered through the neighborhood collecting trees. There were so many complaints about Paul's visits that his parents anchored his cradle in the harbor. All was well until Paul started rocking the cradle and stirring up waves. After his parents had paid for the damage, they decided to move to the backwoods where life would be more peaceful. Paul loved his new wilderness home. He soon grew into a sturdy lad who was so quick on his feet he could blow out a candle and leap into bed before the room became dark. Every day he joined his forest friends in their sports. He raced with the deer and wrestled with the grizzlies. One morning, Paul awoke to find the world under a blanket of blue snow. He heard a woman moan from inside a snowdrift, and there he found a shivering ox calf. Paul adopted him and named him Babe. Both Paul and Babe began growing at an astonishing rate, but the ox never lost the color of the snow from which he'd been rescued. As the years passed, the two of them proved to be extremely helpful in the family business. At 17, Paul grew a fine beard, which he combed with the top of a pine tree. By this time, other settlers were beginning to crowd into the Maine woods. Paul felt an urge to move on. He said goodbye to his parents and headed west. Paul wanted to cross the country with the best lumbering crew available. He hired Ole, a celebrated blacksmith, and two famous cooks, Sourdough Slim and Cream Puff Fatty. Then he signed up legendary lumbermen like Big Tim Burr, Hard Jaw Murphy, and the 7 Hackett brothers. Paul built the camp buildings on wheels so that Babe could haul them from one forest to another. As soon as he had cleared the land, pioneers moved in to set up farms and villages. On the far slopes of the Appalachian Mountains, several of Paul's men were ambushed by a gang of underground ogres called gumbaroos. Paul grabbed the camp dinner horn and blew a thunderous note into the gumbaroos' cave, determined to blast the meanness right out of them. To Paul's dismay, the gumbaroos responded by snatching the entire crew. A wild, rough, and tumble rumpus began inside the den. When that historic tussle was over, the gumbaroos needed 6 weeks to untangle themselves. They disappeared into the depths of the earth, and they've never been heard from since. Paul's next job was to clear the heavily forested Midwest. He hired armies of extra woodmen and built enormous new bunkhouses. The men sailed up to bed in balloons and parachuted down to breakfast in the morning. Unfortunately, the cooks couldn't flip flapjacks fast enough to satisfy all the newcomers. To solve the muddle, Paul built a colossal flapjack griddle. The surface was greased by kitchen helpers with slabs of bacon laced to their feet. Every time the hot griddle was flooded with batter, it blasted a delicious flapjack high above the clouds. Usually, the flapjacks landed neatly beside the griddle, but sometimes they were a bit off target. Paul took a few days off to dig the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes so that the barges of Vermont maple syrup could be brought to camp. Fueled by the powerful mixture of flapjacks and syrup, the men leveled the Great Plains and shaved the slopes of the Rocky Mountains. They probably would have sawed the peaks themselves into logs if a blizzard hadn't suddenly buried the entire mountain range. The blizzard continued for several years, snuffing out the springs, summers, and autumns. The crew burrowed into their bunkhouses and hibernated. Babe became so depressed that Paul asked Ole to make a pair of sunglasses for his friend. When Babe saw the world colored green, he thought he'd stumbled into a field of clover. He began eating the snow with such gusto that soon the treetops reappeared. At that point, all those pent-up springtime simply exploded, dissolving the storm clouds and the remaining snow. Paul and his friends invited some newly arrived settlers to join them in a celebration of all the holidays that they had missed. After the festival, the lumberjacks continued their journey. But as they headed southwest, the blistering sun and hot, giant Texas varmints proved to be more of a problem than they had expected. Travel became so difficult that some of the men began to speak longingly of being buried by a blizzard or bear hugged by a gumbaroo. While crossing Arizona, the griddle curled up like a burned leaf, and the batter evaporated. Deprived of their flapjacks, the lumbermen became weak and discouraged. Paul's great axe fell from his shoulder, gouging a jagged trench, which today is known as the Grand Canyon. Disaster seemed certain until Paul came up with a desperate plan. He headed east and found a family that could sell him a barn filled with corn. Gabe galloped it back across the desert. When the flaming sunrise hit that barn, it exploded, and the lumbermen woke up to find themselves in a raging blizzard of popcorn. Dizzy with joy, they pulled on their mittens and began blasting each other with popcorn balls. A westerly wind kept the cooling clouds of popcorn swirling around Paul and his crew until they crossed California and reached the Pacific Ocean. After he crossed the country, some say that Paul gave up lumbering and rambled north, searching for new areas of untouched wilderness. With the passing years, Paul had been seen less and less frequently. However, along with his unusual size and strength, he seemed to possess an extraordinary longevity. Sometimes, his great bursts of laughter can be heard rumbling like distant thunder across the wild Alaskan mountain ranges where he and Babe still roam. And that's the end of Paul Bunyan. America's favorite tall tale hero. I hope you enjoyed it. Hi, welcome back to our Paul Bunyan Babe, the toilet tissue craft. So I'm going to go over what's in your kit and show you how to work it. So in your kit, you're going to find a toilet tissue roll. You're going to find your direction sheet. You're also going to have all the pieces of Babe on a sheet, which I have colored. And I'm just going to color this last piece here. This is going to go around the body of the toilet tissue roll. And you will need a scissor. You will need a glue stick or some tape. You can use markers. You can use crayons. You can use colored pencils, whatever you like to work with to complete your craft. So, and what I am going to do now is just finish coloring the body. That would be the last thing. So I'm just going to use the back of my sheet here. Rectangle here, and now we're ready to attach it. So I do have the instructions in front of me just to refer back to, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually it's a little large, so I may have to cut it afterwards. I'll see how it works. Yeah, so easier to put some glue right on the body. Easier to work with, I think, that way. Just glue the whole thing all around, especially the edges, and we want to make sure we get the seam. So, oops. Yeah. Okay. And it is really easy to put together like this. So, here we go. I'm going to start over here. Work my way around. Okay. All right, and it, it fits nicely like that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is glue on the head. So I'm going to decide where the front is. I'm going to put the seam in the back, and you don't have to put glue on the whole thing. You really just need the mouth part here, because that way it'll make it a little bit larger if you like. So, oops, there we go, like that. Okay, and now we've got some, I'm going to put the tail on next. Seems like we should put that on last, but we are going to put it on next. And you see that little piece in the back, that little white piece there. So that's going to go here, and that's so that it comes out on both sides. We can see it, so just a little glue right there. Got to be really careful with that piece because it's kind of small. Okay, like that. And yeah, oops, you know what? I forgot about that, because the glue has to go on this side. We want the colored side to come out. This is why it's always good to read the directions again, in case you forget. So don't worry about that little spot that's got the glue on it. It'll dry. You could actually color the other side of it too, now that I think about it. So color on both sides is my suggestion. Yeah, now we can see the tail, which is way better. Okay, so now we need to glue on the legs. And again, we're going to have the same issue there. If you want it to be seen from the back, you could color the back as well. But with markers, it might bleed through, so I don't know how we want to work that. Okay, so I'm going to glue my legs on. And I'm going to use this back as sort of my guide here and here. Okay, I'm going to do one side and then the other side. So I'm going to glue it with the colored part facing out. And let's see. Let's see how that is looking so far. Yep, we got some legs there. Okay, there's my other two. I'm going to do them on the other side. Try and keep it even. Okay. This. And this. Okay. And there is Babe. Okay, and Babe sits up like this. Now, like this, or like this. As you may or may not know, oxen don't normally sit like this, but, for the purpose of this project, we want to be able to see Babe's 2 legs. So, we're going to do it like that. So, I hope you have fun making and playing with Babe the Blue Ox, and you enjoy retelling the story and maybe making up some new ones. And I hope to see you soon in the library. Bye.